Okay, welcome everyone to the next session of the Design Excellence Conference. Thanks so much for joining us. The panel that you're in right now is the Force Majeure Competition finalists. Before we get started, I wanted to take a brief moment to thank all of our conference sponsors. Thank you so much for your support of this event, even as we move online this year. And I also want to share a brief video from one of our sponsors, Sierra Pacific Windows.
Sierra Pacific, windows that never compromise. Our mission, to do it right, to never compromise, to make the best windows and doors you can buy in the most sustainable way possible, from seed to delivered product.
Okay, and with that, I will hand it over to our panelists.
Thank you, Bridget. Let me just get this set up. Can everyone see my screen?
Not yet.
Chet, can you share yours? I just got bumped off.
Yes. Put it in presentation. You guys see that?
Yes.
Getting a lot of head nods. Cool.
Okay. Thanks, Chet. Okay, well, thank you for coming. We are here today to talk about the Force Majeure Design Ideas Competition. This is a collaboration with Design Voice, Latinos in Architecture, and Women in Architecture here in Austin. Chet, if you could go to the next slide. So we are just going to introduce ourselves first and describe the competition, why we decided to do this year. And then we'll go into team presentations. So each awarding team will do a 10-minute presentation. We'll show their video. They'll do a brief presentation and then Q&A. And then at the end, we'll have a live Q&A. Feel free to post any questions you have through the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And we'll try to address those as we go. And if we can't address them as we go, then we'll try to address them at the end. So my name is Viviana Trevino. I am a designer at Page, and I am this year's Design Voice chair.
I'm Chet Morgan. I'm a project architect at Perkins & Will, and I am the chair-elect for Design Voice this year.
And before we get into the competition and what it was about, we wanted to feature our fabulous judges. Because this year it was a collaboration between these three committees, we were able to pull a lot of different resources and make this a really great competition. So I'm going to introduce everybody, and then Connie, if you don't mind introducing yourself. So Al Godfrey, who is also here today, he is with Limbacher and Godfrey and is part of the Trail Foundation and is a board member of the Rosedale Foundation. Beth Wilson, who couldn't join us today, is the Executive Director of Planning and Asset Management at Austin Independent School District. Connie Rivera is this year's Texas Society of Architects President. And Delia Garza, who could not be here today as well, is the City of Austin District 2 Council member. So she's over southeast Austin. Connie and Al, would you mind kind of just talking a little bit about yourselves and the competition and what you experienced throughout the process? Connie, you're muted.
And I think I'm muted too. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear both of you now.
Go for it now.
Oh, okay. I was just getting ready to say, go for it, Connie. But I will. As Viviana said, I'm an architect and a planner in Austin. And what we do mostly, the sweet spot for us is the intersection of parks and historic preservation. And that puts us in a lot of very interesting territory, some of which was germane to today's topic. I'd like to say a couple things in what I think is about 90 seconds about the competition. We spent, the jurors spent an entire Saturday reviewing the submissions. It was great to be involved in that exercise. It was great to be in the kind of virtual room with the jurors, the other jurors, and it was just a really stimulating day. And I'll say that the responses were inspired responses to the competition brief. And if I could, I'm going to just mention a couple of very basic things, again, because we want to hear from them more than from us. It was very clear that the idea of health, nutrition, and resiliency were taken very seriously, and we saw that across the board. We saw a great deal of strategizing with respect to flexibility and change, with the idea that the circumstance we find ourselves in at this very moment is likely to not be permanent. We also saw the ones we gravitated toward had a lot of emphasis, or good emphasis, on community connection. There is a school nearby, there's a park nearby, and a library nearby. They connected to that nicely. They connected to transit, and even to the extent of through paths through the site was in those that we gravitated toward. It was really easy to follow the internal organization of the site, which we appreciated very much. Then I'm going to speak very specifically to Futura, because that was in a category by itself. And in the brief was very specific about, well, here's the community, here's the history of the community, here's where it is geographically, and here are very specific goals. And in some parts of the brief, it was, we need so many showers, we need, very specific. Then there's Futura, which took this sentence out of the objectives and evaluations. And the sentence is, think big and with no limits. And by gosh, they did. And it was great to see, and we as jurors felt like, though it didn't really fit any of the categories very, very neatly, it was such an excellent response on the level of that one statement that we felt it needed to be acknowledged. And we wanted to send a message to future respondents to Force Majeure calls for entries, that when we say we want you to go for it, we really mean we want you to go for it. I'm going to let the Futura people speak for themselves, but I want to say that. Now it's yours, Connie. I'm going back on mute.
Okay. Thank you, Al. And how can I possibly, he spoke to a lot of things that I was thinking as I'm listening. First of all, my name is Connie Rivera. I'm the TXA president for this year. I'm an architect in Corpus Christi, and my primary focus of work is on K through 12 education. And so these projects in a lot of ways spoke to me as well. They were very thoughtful, very exuberant submissions. I think there was a very sort of high level of positivity about the future and about connection to community. And much like Al said, that was something that we as jurors really wanted to focus on, that it did connect to community and became a vital part of that community. And we, speaking of Futura, we like that they swung for the fences. That was just a really awesome project, and out there, and enjoyed it. And but the whole process, I loved the conversation with the other jurors. We got to talk about, even though the projects were specific, as Al mentioned, but we got to speak on broader topics about connection, community, responding to immediate sort of issues, but also looking forward and being adaptable to the future. Those are all wonderful topics of conversation that we were able to have with the submissions that were provided. And so I was really, really happy and fortunate and proud to be a part of this process.
Thanks, Connie. Chet, if you could go to the next one. I'm going to go through this really quickly because I want to get to the bulk of the presentation. Just wanted to share with you guys who we are as Design Voice. So our main mission is to serve our community through design. We you know, anybody is welcome to attend our monthly meetings. We meet every fourth Tuesday of the month. And just like all of these guys were able to participate in this competition, we'd love to have different ideas come forth in our monthly meetings. So to talk about the competition, we've showed who the judges were and everything, but just a little background and you know, why this came about. So obviously as Design Voice, we have different kinds of ways of connecting with community, whether that's through workshops or design competitions, many different varieties of things. So Chet and I, you know, when this whole COVID things happened back in March, you know, we kind of had to reimagine what this year was going to look like. And we saw as architects kind of this lack of understanding of how spatial design could work with kind of socially distanced rules, right? So what really propelled us to create this competition was this quote from Ned Kramer, who's the editor-in-chief of Architect. And it says, "Architects facilitate interaction, create gathering places, and build communities. What then is the appropriate design response to a health crisis that requires physically separating people?" So with this, we couldn't really focus on one brief. We wanted to kind of gauge a variety of different ideas. So we created 3 separate briefs that people could choose, teams could choose which one they would submit on. It was open-ended, or it was open to anybody, I'm sorry. So we kind of just left it open-ended, and we were very surprised that it became kind of this international design ideas competition. We actually had an online forum back in June, and we had about over 70 people join our call from all over the world. There were people from Brazil and Indonesia and Peru and the United Kingdom. And so to me, that was kind of the most exciting part about this whole thing, just because I think many people have realized with COVID-19 that we can actually connect more in a way, because we don't have the limits of geography. And so that was just a really, really cool thing that came out of this. I'm trying to think of other things before I hand it off to Chet. I think for now, that's good, Chet.
Yeah, this is the first year that we did this competition. So the turnout that we had was above what we expected. And so we were happy to see the excitement of it. And we'll talk about it a little bit later, but we're planning, this is gonna be an annual competition. So there will be another Force Majeure next year as well. So if anyone is interested listening right now, or any of the participants want to give it another shot that are on this call, feel free to, and we'll give more information about that early next year and kind of keep everyone in the loop. But here's the site. For anyone that's familiar with Austin, this is in the East Austin area, in the Go Valley area. It's right adjacent to Airport Boulevard. You could see it right there. But it's a greenfield site. The idea wasn't to be, you know, here's a greenfield site, let's infill it with something. It was how do we develop briefs that give back to the community around it. There's already so much stuff here that you could draw from that Al even touched on. The elementary school to the west of it, ACC to the southwest, another high school that's being built right now to the far west, and then just the adjacencies to just busy streets and accessibility to the site is pretty big on this. It's a big site itself too. It's got a lot of different resources to it. There's a detention pond on there, some swales that kind of add a little bit to it that some of our favorite designs really leaned into. Here's the first brief. So we had 3 different briefs. When we first developed the idea to do this competition, we really wanted to have people on the front lines dealing with this pandemic helping with us and kind of looking through it. And so that's why you could see that a little bit in our jury selection. But we just, given that everyone that is dealing with it right now is more busy than they ever have been in their entire life, we decided to back off, and it's probably something that we'll jump into a little bit more next year. But we're kind of, you know, here's 3 different typologies. How do they look in this pandemic world, and how they look like in the normal world, or what we call normal. The first one was the post-pandemic education. Pretty simply, it's what does a school look like during a pandemic and outside of it too. How does it become a resource? How do you teach kids? What ideas do you have that will kind of keep kids learning socially while also being safe as well? We kept the program pretty limited, but it was open-ended, as Viviana was saying. But this was a middle school. The area didn't really have a middle school, so we decided to go with that as the brief for brief A. Brief B, we call is the Urban Cleanliness Park. The main idea behind this was to create a park that can be enjoyed during a pandemic, while also giving back to people experiencing homelessness as well. So there's different resources in there, public toilets, laundry facilities, just as a resource for anyone, who are struggling, or anyone that's struggling during a pandemic. But I feel like myself, I've been using my parks more and more lately, just given that we can't really go out or do anything. And then Project Brief C, this is the Crisis Resource Community Center. The kind of main driver idea behind this is building a space that is adaptable to different conditions. So during a pandemic, it would become essentially an arm of the Central Texas Food Bank. But what does it look like after that? It probably doesn't need to be a Central Texas Food Bank when there's not a pandemic and people aren't needing specific goods and food and all that. So what does it look like after that? And that was also a kind of open-ended idea too. And we really wanted, what we're really asking for is just big ideas. What is a really cool idea? Does it seem like it can work? But did you really take it to the next level?
Yeah, and before we get into the team presentations, we had 48 submissions from all over the world, and we were pleasantly surprised that naturally we kind of had equally spaced numbers between all three briefs. So there wasn't one brief that had 20 submissions or whatnot. It was kind of all equal. Mm-hmm. So yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the team presentations.
Sure. So Futura, the team Futura, you guys want to introduce yourselves really quick, and then I'll play your video.
Sure. Hi, I'm Jeanne Schultz, and I'm principal of Jeanne Schultz Design Studio. For the last 4 years, I was based in Austin, Texas, and recently I moved to Barcelona. We have projects here in Europe, and also still in the United States, and also in West Africa. Danielle Eke, she's a UTSOA student. Danielle?
Yes, hi, my name's Danielle Eke. I'm a fifth year architecture student at UT Austin, University of Texas at Austin. And I worked with John as an intern, I think 2 years ago, and this year I hopped back on to work with her on the Force Majeure competition. So happy to be here.
And Aman, are you still on?
Hey everyone, hi, I'm Aman. I'm an architect, but I am more into the visual aspects of the presentation, basically 3D renderings and CGIs.
Yeah, Aman is the owner of Decor Studio, and his team took care of all of our CGI and rendering so that we could bring this monster to life. They did a great job.
So,
Chet,
let's, yeah.
Just open this up. Okay, let me see. Can you guys hear that?
We can.
Okay, just let it go.
The prompt yielded an opportunity to not only dream up some fun architectural solutions, but also to imagine a whole new world. The world we imagined is a bit bleak. The sky is dusty and the ground is uninhabitable, likely due to destructive human patterns and the inevitable impacts of climate change. As a result, humans have created a new ecosystem, 1,000+ feet in the air, coexisting between the duality of control and organic life. The transit system plays a major role in how we chose to address our design response to education. Imagine this system as a pre-programmed, interconnected circulation track that facilitates the daily schedule of students, staff, and faculty, keeping everyone moving on time and spaced apart at an appropriate distance. We designed a modular, tiered seating system that would allow for social distancing. It takes advantage of vertical height and yields larger classroom settings. The most coveted experience with nature is at the uppermost level, which is composed of the conservatories. we've been able to ask questions like, what direction is our society and our city headed in? And how will our current actions shape our future?
Is everyone able to see that okay? I think I was getting some weird technical issues.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Okay. Thanks so much. You're going to put up the presentation?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I can't see you guys, so you just have to let me know when to go through.
Okay, great. Thank you. First of all, thank you so much, Connie and Al, for your comments on our project. I know I really appreciate that very much, and very grateful for the time that you spent looking at our details. Although we know that the project wasn't extremely contextualized within this neighborhood, although we find public interest and community-focused design to be very important. Particularly, we were looking at this issue of the pandemic, which has particularly hit, I know Europe very hard, and now in the United States very hard. And for me personally, living in Barcelona for the last 10 months, I didn't plan to be here so long, but it has been a whole new world, you know, and I think that we found that this issue of pandemic, we've seen things like this before in the past, and I don't think it's a one-time thing. We will see it in the future. And also the circumstances of today, it got us thinking about how these things are directly related to our behaviors and the way we are using our resources and the way that we are connected to our amenities and connected to our cities even. For example, now, or especially during lockdown, I mean, the city was so desolate and quiet, and seeing a city without people was just an incredible thing. And I know personally I was extremely inspired by this and almost like a dream state. And so when I saw this prompt, I felt very, very excited and wanted to kind of put all of these ideas that I had in my head to the test, and with Danielle and her expertise for us to join forces and think about how we can, you know, make this come to life, and also to address a real issue. We begin with, in considering the future, which is likely going to be addressing issues of food and resource depletion and climate change, we have our first detail that was under consideration is the fact that likely the building will need to be elevated, highly elevated. And so we brought, we lifted the building off the ground, the building system. Can we go to the next slide, please?
Yes.
But I'd say this is more inspiration. So more of that dream state inspiration, sort of surrealist, almost thinking about like, you know, this, yeah, sort of almost not apocalyptic, you know, but this sort of dream state. And also having lived in Europe for a while now, I was also, I have to say, very inspired by Catalan architecture. So maybe in the form of the columns, these twisting stems, you can see a little bit of formal elements from La Sagrada Familia or something of this nature, but a lot more twisted and warped and absurdly high. Gaudi must be turning in his grave, but but yeah, so we imagine the soil as sort of like this dusty Mad Max uninhabitable place down at the ground level, or natural grade. And so the building as an organic cluster, an organic new ecosystem rises above that. Next slide. Our first level begins at almost 1,000 feet in the air. Why 1,000 feet? Honestly, we were looking to the future, and we decided, you know, let's put it high. And we were looking at the vantage point of the highest building in Austin now, and doing some charrettes with that. You know, what would be the perspective of this thing high in the air, and imagining what it would be like to be floating, you know, in these perhaps moving vehicles or flying vehicles. So we put the first level at this. Next slide. The formal elements, sort of like I mentioned earlier, there's only a few simple elements really with these stems, and they took on quite some organic features, almost like mushrooms or like all kinds of things that we felt like they were reminded us of. The building pods, we had just a few types that, depending on the program of the space, would switch whether it was more vertical or more horizontal. But the pods sit perched on these vertical stems, and the stems, because we have so many levels, are weaving through and connected by our transit system, which we talk about later. The spatial programming was quite interesting for us. We felt like although we were looking to the future, we wanted to stay within the site bounds. And so we really felt like we used a lot of every little nook and cranny of the site, and that, you know, if we had infinite space, it would have been a totally different building system. But the hierarchy of each level was such that we wanted our services or more public spaces to be separated, and for each of the classrooms to have their own levels, or each grade level to have their own level. And then each level would have their own cafeteria as well. And then the more public or places where students would gather, likely once a week or every day, like the gymnasium and auditorium, those buildings would be quite large and need to occupy just one building level by itself. This is an example of one building level that has the classrooms on them. We have 6 pods each with one cafeteria per grade level. They're connected. You can see these stems, the light colored lines that are puncturing through. Those are the stems that are continuing through the system, but also the darker ones are the transit system, and the darker rings are the transit system, which is how we traverse through. The transit system was a big part of the design. It's something that we thought of early on. It's something we imagined to be more translucent, that you could see out as you're traversing and sort of dancing around the system and skating around. We see it as a very highly technological, pre-programmed thing, that each system would be pre-programmed and on a time system, so that students would keep moving at a particular distance and maintain social distancing, and that each, according to the daily or weekly schedule, it would operate based on that, almost like even if they were cars on the ground, but just instead in the air and in these tubes. And we even thought about sort of how that would be possible within the tubes. So we imagined maybe they're hovering on hoverboards, and maybe it's an electromagnetic strip. And so we even went to that detail of thinking about how they would traverse through. And then even once they entered and exited that transit station, what does that mean once they enter and exit the buildings, which actually made it which actually yielded an interesting opportunity for us to have some controlled entrances and exits and circulation that could be pretty safe. Next. This is an example of how we imagine the transit system, although translucent. This is a section, and the classrooms. Each of these classrooms has 362 pod niches per each, which had our building system had a total of 6,516 students, which is quite a bit. Can I go to next level? Each of these niches we imagined would have one student, and with the professor standing maybe at the center down here. And we assumed that each of these pods would have a view of the teacher down at the center, and then this nice glass top to let in plenty of light and views of the outside. So I think that taking advantage of this vertical height and what that allows for was a strategy that we imagined, if we develop this further, could be implemented to the other larger buildings, for instance, the gymnasium or the auditorium, this sort of almost like cathedral-like tiered seating system where you could have a lot of people together stacked. And how do they get there? Well, we imagined that if you're looking at the floor plan on the left here, this transit station. So on the right, you have the transit tube, which then arrives to the transit station where it intersects with the pod. And then kind of like a metro station when you get out. So there's a specific space for it inside the pod, and then you circulate on around the edges of the circle, or around the edges of the pod, and go to the back of the classroom. The pod is quite deep. Where it sits on the stem, you can see, or where the finished floor level is, you can see that the pod kind of droops a bit. So we have a lot of space down below the finished floor level. So we imagined, kids could go underground and potentially go into some sort of, filtering, filing system that would bring them up and individually into their pods. But that's a detail we didn't have time to flesh out, but we did, do some circulation work to get from the transit tube into the station, and then down into another area behind their niche. And so the classroom, I think this was a really big, important design element for us, because we also felt like it's social, it takes care of social distancing and allows everyone to still be together. And then the conservatory was a really special design element because we imagined this really beautiful enclosed experience with nature that anyone or the children could go to every day. When we got to make our mock-up schedule, I thought, having time at the conservatory for 1 hour every day to have a respite with nature would be definitely needed, especially when we don't know how much greenery is going to be available at this time. And then in addition to the conservatory, we have the individual stems. And that's all. Thank you so much. Thanks for listening. And we want to thank WIA, Leah, and Design Voice and AIA Austin. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Team Futura. I do want to be respectful of everybody's time, but I do want to have some questions from Al or Connie if you guys have anything, or any of the other panelists.
I just think it was a very nice verbal presentation, and we, for those listening, might be interested to know that we did not see the videos, so it's nice to see the videos as well. But from the presentation you just gave, it is clear to me that this design, which frankly was, for our purposes, mostly simply beautiful, was also very, very carefully thought through. And I don't mean to demean the thinking that was part of your presentation, but the depth of the thinking process that you just explained is very nice to hear. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just wanted to echo what Al was saying, is that I feel like just from watching this video and hearing your presentation, we got a whole new layer of information that we did not have before, but it just really added to the project. And again, great project. Really, really appreciate the effort.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, John S. Chase Middle School. This is Jim and Hannah. Can you introduce yourselves, please?
Hi, I'm Jim Opelt. I'm an architect at LPA in San Antonio. And now not looking forward to following that one. Really good job, guys.
Hi, I'm Hannah. Jim is my brother, and I'm a second year interior design master's student at the School of Architecture at UT.
Sweet. I'll open up the video now.
John S. Chase Middle School protects the well-being of a community physically, socially, and environmentally. The design approach for the small middle school in historically Black East Austin is centered on several distinct goals. Our first and most important goal is to create a highly transparent public space which promotes inclusivity, encourages openness, and integrates nature. Second, the educational facility operates optimally during a viral pandemic and adapts seamlessly to contemporary educational environments. And third, the simple modular structure maximizes flexibility and allows expansion. Preservation of access and views to natural site promotes public health and equity in the densifying neighborhood. Elevated wooden walkways connect the school to the street and develop urban links to the landscape. The boardwalks encourage student engagement and provide the necessary space for social distancing. The central strategy of the building's design is to reduce risk of viral spread through natural ventilation. Classroom square footage is duplicated to outdoor capacity, creating hybrid learning environments. Shade, HVLS fans, operable apertures, and ideal site orientation make outdoor learning possible. When students are confined to indoor learning, distributed HVAC systems place the interior spaces under positive pressure and bring fresh air in. 6 classrooms accommodate 20 students each, using traditional school scheduling. Modular movable desk facilitate students indoors or out. Students stay at personal stations while instructors rotate teaching spaces. John S. Chase Middle School is named after a prominent Black modernist architect. Chase was the first Black student to attend the University of Texas School of Architecture. Many cherished public buildings were designed by Chase and define the Black East Austin community today.
Right. Now I'm gonna pull up the board here. So Jim or Hannah, just tell me where to point.
All right, so I'm just going to start off by talking about some of our central strategies. Essentially, we wanted to take traditional education structuring and kind of operate around that. We looked at what's currently known about viral spread and kind of applied that to our design. What we know about it is that outdoor ventilation really minimizes risk, and also to that, we wanted to make sure that we were designing a building that facilitated current needs, but also accommodated for the future, for expansion, and is a really enjoyable, practical building for the future as well. Additionally, we looked at how hybrid indoor-outdoor environments reduces density in education structures. And we really focused on materials in a way where we could leverage, natural virucidal and antimicrobial technology with brick and copper alloys and silver woven fabrics. I think with that, Jim's gonna take over and talk about program.
Yeah, so I'll just share a little bit about kind of site and program arrangement. So we placed the program at the center of the site with the public entry on Tillery. And in doing so, we're able to preserve playfields to the south and additional open space to the north. And then we use these boardwalks to connect to the north to Oak Springs and public transit, and then to the west to engage the pond. In terms of the program layout, we used a 32 by 32 foot grid. And it was really kind of about exploring how we could space the elements apart, both horizontally on the ground plane, but also vertically to allow kind of space and ventilation. And then we were using a clear span structure for flexibility in the case that densification, additional building elements conditioned below the roof could be added later. And then we used kind of this really high roof element in the teaching space area. And I think we were just kind of thinking of background growing up, being in barns or, warehouses that have these vast kind of high spaces to get breeze flow through and to optimize comfort for outdoor learning.
Great. Al or Connie, did you guys want to jump in and add any other additional comments for the John S. Chase?
I went first before. Why don't I give the floor to Connie first?
Okay, thank you, Al. What I really liked the sort of modular aspect of it, but one of the things and this is true of many of the ones that we're talking about today, there was a real sort of connection to the site, real connection to the neighborhood and to the community at large. I thought that, and this seemed friendly to the site, friendly to the surrounding architecture. Didn't want to sort of dominate or it didn't sort of jar against what was already there. I could easily see this being built. Just really thoughtful, and it felt like it would be a good, friendly school space because it's, you're dealing with kids, and so it would be very different if it were an office space or something else like that. And I thought this feels like a school, and it feels like a school in East Austin, and I really enjoyed that. And then I also like the integration of outdoor use.
Yeah, to me, the most successful part of the design is like the flexibility of opening up a classroom and having that ventilation come in and out. I thought that was really thoughtful, and how we could have class without, with being safe. I wanted to ask you guys, I guess, how did you gravitate towards this brief? Were there other briefs that you were thinking about doing, and why did you choose this school?
We went kind of straight to the educational program. So I work a lot on school design, and actually our dad's been doing it for about 30 years too. So hopefully Hannah in the future too. But we just, we wanted to use this as an opportunity to just spend time thinking about how education could be accommodated in this environment. And then also I think, there's some thought about how existing structures might be broken down or subtracted from to adapt using some of these strategies. So we just wanted to explore that.
Thanks for all that, Jim. I will offer a couple of thoughts. One is it seemed, as soon as we saw this, it seemed like maybe this was done by people who have a prior professional interest in schools, that this isn't the first school that this team has contemplated. And what you've just said, Jim, is that in your family, there's at least a 30-year history of thinking about schools, which is great. Also, I really appreciate that you named this after John Chase, in that he was an important figure. I don't know, he might still be alive, but I don't think he's active professionally, at least very much. And this looks like something that he could have done himself. And that's a very nice compliment, I believe. The specific to the particular solution, a couple of things struck me. One is, it's odd to say this on a day where here in Austin, it's at least 100 degrees Fahrenheit. But I think that we have, as a culture, grown to expect everything to be air conditioned. That you can't learn unless it's air conditioned. You can't eat unless it's air conditioned. You can't do anything. You can't exercise. You have to go into just on and on. And this explores the idea that, well, maybe that's not true. And I think, in fact, it's not true. But this is a lovely solution and makes that idea of that in-between space seem attractive and inviting. And I like that very much. Even in the plan where, as you said, Jim, you pulled the building apart and allow breezeways through the plan. Very nice. And then further, the idea of breaking it into two separate buildings, which have a landscape kind of hyphen between them, all very nice. And thank you very much for this submission.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have Tillery Park.
Hi, everyone. My name is Danielle Lake. I live in Philadelphia, where I work as an architect, planner, and urban designer with the firm LRK. Philly is also where Jess and I met and started working together while we were studying city and regional planning at University of Pennsylvania for grad school. Really excited to be here, very humbled and grateful to participate in the competition and being in such great company with these other designers. So thank you.
And my name is Jessica Arias. I'm now living in New York, working as a landscape designer at Matthews Nelson Landscape Architects. We're really appreciative that we can be here, and we are excited to keep working together. We love working together.
Sweet. All right, here's your video.
So the idea is that really there would be kind of a network that stitches across these other constructed barriers to neighborhoods. And that network would be punctuated by things like this prototypical project, which is the Tillery Park, which has very specific services for the people who live in that neighborhood. So here it's very close to what's already a state-sanctioned homeless encampment. So this provides services for people who don't have a home, who live in the neighborhood, but then it's also a gathering place for anybody who wants to use it. So it really includes all Austinites in issues of public health and well-being as well.
This whole site kind of becomes this place that's really good for recreation and wellness, and there's walking trails and opportunities to experience nature, but then we've added this like layer of productivity on top of it. So it becomes a place where there are productive gardens or like agricultural projects that occur that are great assets in the community, like when things are stable, but when things become super unpredictable or uncertain during a pandemic or a natural disaster, like this becomes almost invaluable as a place that's known and trusted. It could be an access point for testing or vaccines, or it's a drop-off or pickup location for a CSA farmer's box, or dropping off donations for people that are experiencing homelessness. This site like really has a lot of flexibility, and we've tried to build that into, I think, like our scheme.
Congrats again, guys. Let me pull up the...
And I will say we are running short on time, so let's we just have to kind of flip through because I do want to give Team Nourish time to present.
Yes, sorry about that. Here's the board.
Okay, well, thank you. We'll make an effort not to repeat anything that's in the video, but the video is pretty representative of our process during the pandemic, because we've done everything virtually since Danielle is in Philly and I'm in New York. So everything has been over Zoom. So we explained a little bit of the site context in the video, but we just, we did want to celebrate the fact that there is a thriving community and, a historical community too in East Austin, in spite of its lack of access and some very deliberate attempts to isolate those communities. So one of the things that we really wanted to point out today was that, there's this history of segregation in East Austin, and part of that had to do with public housing. So on the site context map, we show where the location of Emancipation Park was, which is where the first segregated public housing project was in Austin, and that was, it's on the first slide there, just west of Tillery Park. Because this was, a very deliberate attempt to segregate Black families. And the way that they developed this was by condemning the site of Emancipation Park, which was the site of an annual celebration to commemorate the abolition of slavery. So in thinking about the inspiration for what we would design for Tillery Park, we knew that we weren't going to create the same type of experience. But, at the same time, we were recognizing the need for a public and civic gathering space that would specifically be geared towards the needs and the enjoyment of disenfranchised communities. And now looking at this site diagram, it's a civic space for communities that have been isolated, but it's also part of a much larger system that's an integrator. So we think about I-35 as being this physical barrier, and then the very imminent redevelopment of Airport Boulevard as having the potential to sort of create these similar effects, and the location in the neighborhood of Tillery Park being squeezed in the middle. We imagine that Tillery Park would be part of a larger trail and park system that sort of transcends all of those corridor boundaries that are really dividing neighborhoods and kind of stitch parts of the city back together. So on the next slide.
Yeah, so I think Jess made it very clear that, as planners and urban designers, we really zoom out and look at the larger forces that surround and impact the site. We look first at how people would approach the site and sort of identified these major access points, which included folks arriving from transit, people arriving by car, where any trail connections would be that could connect to the nearby community college and the adjacent elementary school. And these major access points sort of start to set up the circulation and overall site organization, as well as the large water feature in the middle of the site. And because of these parameters, we knew early on that the central building would house services and indoor programming, and it would be central to the site. We imagined that a sloping roof could become a surface for the amphitheater and set up views across the water and provide a point of prospect for the entire site. And because we have so much land to work with on the site, we had an opportunity to kind of take advantage of its fertility. We allocated a large amount of space for community gardens that have capacity to output large volumes of produce for the surrounding community. And we sort of viewed this as a way to be an asset, not only during times of stability, but also when an unexpected disaster or pandemic impacts supply chains to grocery stores, and it could be a productive community garden of a large scale and would be invaluable to this community. We also saw this as an opportunity to provide sources of income for people experiencing housing instability who come to Tillery Park for other services. We thought this could be a place to earn a meal or living wage and work in these gardens while simultaneously coexisting with other members of the community. And in a small step, we hoped that this site would continue to break down the stigma of homelessness and break down barriers within the East Austin community. And just a quick note, moving on to this slide. We knew early on that we wanted to create some topographic interest on what is generally a flat site, but also take advantage of some of the shade structures, which you'll see on the next slide in just a minute, but hold here for a second. Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay. I'll just say that for the services building, we really wanted to think carefully about how folks would be entering the building from the variety of access points, and sort of thinking about circulation, privacy, social distancing, and sustainability all in one. So if you were to enter the building through the plaza entry, there would be public sinks and a place to drop off donations and speak with like a community resource liaison. But by following the arrows around the space, you're taken into a more private area, or either enter from the pedestrian entry on the right side of the drawing, where you can find more private shower pods and a laundry service for folks who are coming in to use the building for hygiene reasons. We felt that designing the building as being concrete and surrounded by a mound of earth, we could envision lower heating and cooling costs through the seasons, as well as a defensible space that would be a place for refuge for the community in times of natural disaster or things like a tornado, things like this. And one last note here, we were envisioning that all the plumbing facilities would return and filter any gray water into the irrigation system for the productive agricultural plots above, and then take advantage of the rainwater collected from the shade structures, if you go to the next slide, that are acting as a place for respite from the hot Texas heat. And while you're enjoying this elevated space in the amphitheater, those shade structures are simultaneously acting as an opportunity to collect rainwater and filter it into the plumbing facilities below. If you go to the next slide. And just the last
so thanks. So Danielle talked about the mound in the building being sort of the first instance where water is collected and it's immediately used. It's used for shower facilities, laundry, as well as irrigation for the gardens. But then it's also stored here as part of a larger collection system that's connected to other parts of the site, like the permeable areas in the plaza and different purification systems that are throughout the site. So in a similar way, on the same slide there, you can see where in the large picnic pavilion, there's also a collection of water collection features, these basins that will, make potable water immediately available for visitors to the park, but then it's also purified and stored there. And then when that system reaches capacity, it overflows into the retention pond, which, has these sort of expandable boundaries, but it's now protected by this newly restored riparian buffer, which includes these large oak trees and other native Texas trees, and provides this really unique trail experience for the park users and connects again to this larger system. So on the following slide, this drawing is really about a collection of ideas of how we imagined that the experience of the park would be, that the circulation sort of on this diagonal across the site plan would really be sort of the organizing factor and sort of a callback to the location of the site, which is sort of underneath this, ridge in this park system. And if you see sort of on the left side of the drawing, there are these grove areas of trees where the program is more flexible, it's civic space. There's a place where a farmer's market could take place. And then, that's in contrast to the more programmed areas like the facilities that Danielle talked about and the soccer fields, which are sort of a focal point of the site. But then it's also connected to this larger trail experience. So thank you so much for, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, we're running out of time. So okay. Al or Connie, do you have some quick comments before we move on to Team Nourish?
Well, just very quickly, one of the things I really enjoyed about this project is that it looked at everything on a multi-levels. You talked about different modes of transportation and access to the site. I saw that. I saw the connection. I saw that you were looking not only programmatically, but also beyond that, looking at potential income, potential ways for folks to kind of recharge, not only immediately, but also in terms of their life situation. You went beyond the program in a lot of ways. We really appreciated that, and we saw that this is just a really fascinating, multi-dimensional project. I'm gonna drop off for Al.
I'm going to just say I echo what Connie said. We had a really nice time talking about this project and enjoying this project. And I'm going to leave it right there so we can give some space to Nourish. Thank you both very much for this.
Thank you.
Sounds good, Al. So we are at the end of our time, but we still have more time to present. So we probably won't get to our questions, but Nourish, you guys are up.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Juan Pablo Fuentes. I'm originally from Peru, but I did go to school in Houston, Texas. And right now I'm transitioning into the Netherlands, so I'm in that transition.
Hi, my name is Gabby. I'm originally from Peru. And then I met Pablo and Van in grad school here. Van? You're mute. Van, I think you're mute.
Yes, I am mute. I'm Van, and like Gabby said, we met each other in grad school. My background's in architecture, and I also do real estate development in New York City. And it was a real pleasure to work on this project with Gabby and Juan Pablo. So I'll just jump right into the presentation since we're short on time.
Do you not want me to show the video?
Yes, I thought you were going to show the video first.
Yes, I'll do it right now.
Of course.
Oops, that's the wrong one. Sorry, guys. Awesome. Okay, let me pull up y'all's board really quick, and I'm going to pull it up on concept board right here. So if we need to zoom in on anything, just let me know.
Sure, thank you. So you can zoom into the rightmost diagrams. I'll just quickly start there. But the video pretty much summarizes what we were intending for the project. But one of the things that we've noticed during this pandemic was really what we took for granted on those days was our ability to get food on a daily basis from grocery stores, etc. And what we saw was this disruption of the national food supply chain, and it exposed the vulnerabilities at a community level, and especially for communities like East Austin, which is historically a food desert. And on top of that, it has tremendous economic fragility. which is impacting the families within the neighborhood on all levels. So what we saw as our solution or proposal for this crisis center was something that transitioned from delivering food and essential goods during the pandemic times, but post-crisis, it's still food, but in a different way that can engage the community, and also leveraging the really, really rich food culture that Austin has in general, from all levels, from the, the food truck level to high cuisine. And in addition to that amazing food culture, we have a very diverse and strong local community that we wanted to leverage, including the middle school. There are some existing community gardens there, and the library and other services that are available, but just need a platform to engage not only the neighborhood at the neighborhood scale, but at a larger East Austin and city-wide scale. So architecturally, we were looking at a project that would provide the flexibility to give us an opportunity to provide a very compact and streamlined approach during the crisis mode, but then is able to open up during post-crisis. And we looked at the site as, from an urban design standpoint, as having this urban edge on Tillery Street, and then taking into account the existing really beautiful natural landscape there that could be an opportunity to transition into a park post-COVID. So architecturally, we were also looking at other things to make the project itself more resilient and more sustainable, taking into account solar panels, the harvesting of rainwater, and we drew upon one of the Texas vernacular typology of the dog trot to create these spaces that were both indoor-outdoor spaces that passively cools the buildings, but also provide opportunities for gathering. That, as we have learned in this pandemic, outdoor spaces is a safer way to convene. And it's probably something that we have inherited socially moving forward from this pandemic. But anyway, we're still learning a lot of things about how humans react to this situation. And so we left much of the programming up to the community. We just wanted this idea of creating a platform that would allow for East Austin to become this food oasis. And that's it.
Sweet.
Well, I know it was part of the brief, but I really truly enjoyed the imagery you showed of how, during a crisis mode, what it looks like, and then afterwards, how it's activated and how it changes, but it's still, fully engaged. That was, I think, really powerful. Al, Connie, do you have any comments?
I'm going to let Al start this time. I took over the past couple of times.
I'll just offer a couple of things on a site level. I really liked the site organization. I liked the way this building was pushed up against the one edge where there was contiguous residential fabric. And this seems like just really a nice neighborhood a counterpart to that fabric to me. I like the modularity of the thinking. I like the through passage, the kind of ventilation and the pedestrian passage. And I like the organization around the edges, activating the street edge adjacent to this neighborhood and keeping the more developed portions of the site at the edge to leave the center portion of the site more pastoral and natural. Now for you, Connie.
And yeah, to echo Al's comment, that was something we talked about quite a bit with this submission, was how it did treat the edges and define the edges. And that was something sort of kind of acting as a counterpoint to the neighborhood and engaging with the neighborhood. Really liked the scale and the feel of this project, where, and it was that it was really fully usable and either during a pandemic or a time of crisis and not, but also retains much of its sort of natural pastoral quality. this was another really fine project we really enjoyed.
Before we hop off, I want to open it up to any questions from the audience that they may have.
Keep an eye on it. I haven't seen any questions come through yet.
I guess just as a question to any of the panelists, how is the design process different, I guess, designing virtually as opposed to being together in a group?
Mm-hmm.
I've been in school, and I was in school whenever we went to lockdown, and so it was a pretty intimidating thing at first. And then ultimately, I just was really grateful for the opportunity for me to actually be able to connect with my family on this project. And it actually, with the semester and with this project, it turned out to be much simpler than it seemed at first, with all the technology that is available. So that was a pleasant surprise. And I think some of these strategies will probably carry on in the future as well.
Well, thank you, Hannah. I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up. I know Chet wants to make an announcement about next year.
Yes.
Thank you so much for all of you guys participating. I think Al and Connie mentioned it was really difficult to choose 4 winners because there were so many great ideas. So for anybody out there and also the panelists, be on the lookout for some kind of publication or event where we showcase other projects as well. Mm-hmm. There's some very noteworthy ideas too, so we want to showcase those.
Yeah, the whole field of entries was really outstanding, and so we're definitely excited to produce that document and share all the really good ideas that y'all came up with, and just to kind of think about the future. We're also looking forward to next year, and where we're going to do this all over again. It will be a different prompt, different site. And a whole different challenge. So hopefully we get hopefully we get our teams to participate again, and hopefully we'll get a good turnout again.
Thank you.
Yeah. So
thank you so much.
So thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great one.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you, guys. I'm going to close out the meeting if y'all are done chatting.
I think we are done.
Great. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Bridget.
Mm-hmm.